Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more A Testament of Hope, the writings and speeches of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Let's get back into this. The final major area of untapped power for the Negro is in the professional area or political area. Negro population is burgeoning in major cities as tides of migrants flow into them in search of employment and opportunity. These new migrants have substantially higher birth rates than characterize the white population. The two trends, along with the exodus of the white population to the suburbs, are producing fast gathering Negro majorities in the large cities. The changing composition of the cities must have been in the light of their political significance, particularly in the North. The large cities substantially determine the political destiny of the state. These states, in turn, hold the dominating electoral votes in presidential contests. The future of the Democratic Party, which rests so heavily on its coalition of urban minorities, cannot be assessed without taking into account which way the Negro vote turns. The wistful hopes of the Republican Party for large city influence will be also be decided not in the boardrooms of great corporations, but in the teeming ghettos. Its 1964 disaster with Goldwater, in which fewer than 6% of Negroes voted Republican, indicates that the illustrious ghost of Abraham Lincoln is not sufficient for winning Negro confidence. Not so long ago, not so long as the party fails to shrink the influence of its ultra right wing. The growing Negro vote of the South is another source of power, as it weakens and enfeebles the Dixiecrats by concentrating its blows against them. It undermines the congressional coalition of Southern reactionaries and their Northern Republican colleagues. That coalition, which has always exercised a disproportionate power in Congress by controlling its major committees, will lose its ability to frustrate measures of social advancement and to impose its perverted definition of democracy on the political thought of the nation. The Negro vote presently is only a partially realized strength. It can still be doubled in the South. In the North, even where Negroes are registered in equal proportions to whites, they do not vote in the same proportions. Assailed by the sense of futility, Negroes resist participating in the empty ritual. However, when the Negro citizen learns that united and organized pressure can achieve measurable results, he will make his influence felt. Out of the consciousness, the political power of the aroused minority will be enhanced and consolidated. Up to now, that power has been inconsequential because of paradoxically, although Negroes vote with great discernment and traditionally as a bloc, essentially we are unorganized, disunited, and subordinated in the decision making process. There is no correlation between the numerical importance of the urban Negro vote to the party it supports and the influence we wield in determining the party's program and policies or its implementation of existing legislation. Our political leaders are bereft of influence in the councils of political power. The new task of the liberation movement, therefore, is not merely to increase the Negro registration and vote. Equally imperative is the development of the strong voice that is heard in the smoke filled rooms where party debating and bargaining proceed. A black face that is mute in party councils is not political representation. The ability to be independent, assertive, and respected when the final decisions are made is indispensable for the authentic expression of power. Negroes are traditionally manipulated because the political powers take advantage of the three major weaknesses. The first relates to the manner in which our political leaders emerge. The second is the failure so far to achieve effective political alliances. The third is the Negro's general reluctance to participate fully in political life. The majority of Negro political leaders do not ascend to prominence on the shoulders of mass support. Although genuinely popular leaders are now emerging, most are selected by white leadership, elevated to position, supplied with the resources, and inevitably subjected to white control. The mass of Negroes nurtures a healthy suspicion toward the manufactured leaders. Experience tells them that color is the chief argument their leaders are offering to induce loyalty and solidarity. The Negro politician they know spends little time in persuading them that he embodies personal integrity, commitment, and ability. He offers few programs and less service. Tragically, he is in too many respects not a fighter for the new life, but a figurehead for the old one. Hence, very few Negro political leaders are impressive or illustrious to their constituents. They enjoy only limited loyalty and qualified support. This relationship, in turn, hampers the Negro leader in bargaining with genuine strength and independent firmness with white party leaders. The whites are all too well aware of his importance and his remoteness from his constituents, and they deal with him as a powerful subordinate. He is accorded a measure of dignity and personal respect, but not political power. The Negro politician, therefore, funds himself in a vacuum, finds himself in a vacuum. He has no base in either direction on which to build influence and attain leverage. In Negro life, there is a unique and unnatural dichotomy between community leaders who have the respect of the masses and professional political leaders who are held in polite disdain. Those who will lead civil rights groups, churches, unions, and other social organizations are actually hybrids, Although they bargain for political programs, they generally operate outside of partisan politics in two national polls to name the most respected Negro leaders. Out of the highest 15, only a single political figure, Congressman Adam Clayton Powell, was included, and he was in the lower half of both lists. This is a marked contrast to polls in which white people choose their most popular leaders. Political personalities are always high on the lists and are reported in goodly numbers. There is no Negro political personality evoking affection, respect, and emulation to correspond to John F. Kennedy, Eleanor Roosevelt, Herbert Lehman, Earl Warren, and Adlai Stevenson, to name but a few. The circumstances in which Congressman Powell emerged into leadership and the experiences of his career are unique. It would not shed light on the larger picture to attempt to study the very individual factors that apply to him. It is fair to say no other Negro political leader is similar either in the strengths he possesses, the power he attained, or the errors he has committed. And so we shall have to do more than register and more than vote. We shall have to create leaders who embody virtues and we can respect, who have moral and ethical principles we can applaud with the enthusiasm that enables us to rally support for them based on the confidence and trust. We will have to demand high standards and give consistent, loyal support to those who merit it. We will have to be a reliable constituency for those who prove themselves to be committed political warriors in our behalf. When our movement has partisan political personalities whose unity with their people is unshakable and whose independence is genuine, then they will be treated in white political councils with the respect those who embody such power deserve. In addition to the development of genuinely independent and representative political leaders, we shall have no we shall have to master the art of political alliances. Negroes should be natural allies to many white reform and independent political groups, yet they are more commonly organized by old line machine politicians. We will have to learn to refuse crumbs from big city machines and steadfastly demand a fair share of the loaf. When the machine politicians demur, we must be prepared to act in unity and throw our support to such independent parties or reform wings of the major parties as are prepared to take our demands seriously and fight for them vigorously. This is political freedom. This is political maturity expressing our aroused and determined new spirit to be treated as equals in all aspects of life. The future of the deep structural changes we seek shall not be found in decaying political machines. It lies in new alliances of Negroes, Puerto Ricans, labor, liberals, certain church and middle class elements. It is noteworthy that the largest single civil rights action ever conducted was the New York school boycott, when nearly 500,000 Negroes and Puerto Ricans united as a demonstration that emptied segregated schools. The art of alliance politics is more complex and intricate than it is generally pictured. It is easy to put exciting combinations on paper. It evokes happy memories to recall that our victories in the past decade were won on the broad coalition of organizations representing a wide variety of interests. But we deceive ourselves if we envision the same combination backing structural changes in the society. It did not come together for such a program and will not reassemble for it. If true alliance is based upon some self interest of each component group and common interest into which they merge, for an alliance to have performance and or permanence and loyal commitment from its various elements, each of them must have a goal from which it benefits, and none must have an outlook in basic conflict with the others. Thus, we cannot talk loosely of an alliance with all labor. Most unions have mutual interest with us, both can profit in the relationship. Yet, with some unions that persist in discrimination to retain their monopoly of jobs, we have no common ground. To talk of alliances with them is to talk of mutual deception and mutual hypocrisy. The same test must be applied to churches and church bodies. Some churches recognize that to be relevant in moral life, they must make equality an imperative. With them, the basis of alliance is strong and enduring, but toward those churches that shun and evade the issue, that are mute or timorous on social and economic questions, we are no better than strangers, even though we sing the same hymns in worship of the same God. If we employ the principle of selectivity along these lines, we will find millions of allies also in serving themselves also support us. And on such sound foundations, unity and mutual trust are tangible accomplishment will flourish. It is no more academic exercise to scrutinize alliance relationships. They are the keys to political progress. Of late, some scholars have begun to question the usefulness of the Negro vote as a tool for social advancement. Matthews and Prothero put it that the concrete benefits to be derived from the franchise under the conditions that prevail in the South have often been exaggerated. The concrete, measurable payoffs from Negro voting in the South will not be revolutionary. They point to the limited gains Negroes have attained in the North and apply them to the South. Their conclusion has some validity because they confine them to conditions that prevail in the South, but conditions in the South are not static. They are changing. A primary Negro political goal in the South is the elimination of racism as an electoral issue. No objective observer can fail to see that even with a half-finished campaign to enfranchise Negroes, some profound changes have already occurred. For a number of years, there were de facto alliances in some states in which Negroes voted for the same candidate as whites because he had shifted from a racist to a moderate position, even though he did not articulate an appeal for Negro votes. In recent years, the transformation has accelerated, and many white candidates have entered alliances publicly as they perceived that the Negro vote was becoming a substantial and permanent factor. They could not remain aloof from it. More and more competition will develop among white political forces for such a significant block of votes, and monolithic white unity based on racism will no longer be possible. Racism is a tenacious evil, but it is not immutable. Millions of underprivileged whites are in the process of considering the contradiction between segregation and economic progress. White supremacy can feed their egos, but not their stomachs. They will not go hungry or forego the affluent society to remain racially ascendant. Governors Wallace and Maddox, whose credentials as racists are impeccable, understand this, and for that reason they present themselves as liberal populists as well as liberal populists as well. Their demagoguery is little known to Northerners who have no opportunity to hear the speeches they make in local communities. Temporarily, they can carry water on both shoulders, but the ground is becoming unsteady beneath their feet. Each of them was faced in the primary with a new breed of white Southerner. Their opponents were not inconsequential political figures. Former governors were in the race, making open public appeals for the Negro vote, and for the first time in history, meeting with Negro organizations to solicit support. They championed economic reform without racial demagoguery. They won significant numbers of white votes, insufficient for victory, but sufficient to point the future directions of the South. The time may not be far off when the awakened poor and backward white voter will heed and support the authentic economic liberalism of former Governor Arnold of Georgia and former Lieutenant Governor Flowers of Alabama. Then, with the growing Negro vote, they will develop an alliance that displaces the Wallaces, and with them racism as a political issue. It is true that the Negro vote has not transformed the North, but the fact that the Northern alliances and political action generally have been poorly executed is no reason to predict that the negative experiences will be automatically extended in the North or duplicated in the South. The Northern Negro has never used direct action on a mass scale for reforms, and anyone who predicted 10 years ago that the Southern Negro would also neglect it would have dramatically been proved in error. Everything Negroes need, and many of us need almost everything, will not, like magic, materialize from the use of the ballot. Yet, as a lever of power, if it is given studious attention and employed with the creativity we have proved through the protest activities we possess, it will help to achieve many far-reaching changes during our lifetime. The final reason for our dearth of political strength, particularly in the North, arises from the grip of the old tradition of many individual Negroes. They tend to hold themselves aloof from politics as a serious concern. They sense that they are manipulated, and their defense is a cynical disinterest to safeguard themselves on the front from the exploitation that torments them in so many areas. They shut the door to political activity and retreat into the dark shadows of passivity. Their sense of futility is deep, and in terms of their bitter experiences, it is justified. They cannot perceive political action as a source of power. It will take patient and persistent effort to eradicate this mood, but the new consciousness of strength developed in a decade of stirring agitation can be stabilized or can be utilized to channel constructive Negro activity into political life and eliminate the stagnation produced by an outdated and defensive paralysis. In the future, we must become intensive political activists. We must be guided in this direction because we need political strength more desperately than any other group in American society, because of us, or most of us, too poor to have an adequate economic power, and many of us are too rejected by the culture to be part of any tradition of power. Necessity will draw us toward the power inherent in the creative uses of politics. Negroes nurture a persisting myth that the Jews of America attained social mobility and status solely because they had money. It is unwise to ignore the error for many reasons. It, in a negative sense, it encourages anti-Semitism and overestimates money as a value. In a positive sense, the full truth reveals a useful lesson. Jews progressed because they possessed a tradition of education combined with social and political action. The Jewish family enthroned education and sacrificed to get it. The result was for more than abstract learning, uniting social action with educational competence. Jews became enormously effective in political life. Those Jews who became lawyers, businessmen, writers, entertainers, union leaders, and medical men did not vanish into the pursuits of the trade exclusively. They lived an active life in political circles, learning the techniques and arts of politics. Nor was it only the rich who were involved in the social and political action. Millions of Jews for half a century remained relatively poor, but they were far from passive in social and political areas. They lived in homes in which politics was a household word. They were deeply involved in radical parties, liberal parties, and conservative parties. They formed many of them. Very few Jews sank into despair and escapism when the discrimination assailed the spirit and corroded initiative. Their life raft on the sea of discouragement was social action. Without overlooking the towering differences between the Negro and the Jewish experiences, the lesson of Jewish mass involvement in social and political action and education is worthy of emulation. Negroes have already started on this road in creating the protest movement, but this is only a beginning. We must involve everyone we can reach, even those with inadequate education, and together acquire political sophistication by discussion, practice, and reading. Jews without education learned a great deal from the political meetings, mass meetings, and trade union activities. Informal discussions and reading at home or in the streets are educational. They challenge the mind and inform our actions. Education without social action is a one-sided value because it has no true power potential. Social action without education is a weak expression of pure energy. Deeds, uniform, deeds uniformed by educated thought can take false directions. When we go into action and confront our adversaries, we must be armed with knowledge as they. Our policies should have the strength of deep analysis beneath them to be able to challenge the clever sophistries of our opponents. The many thousands of Negroes who have already found intellectual growth and spiritual fulfillment on this path know its creative possibilities. They are not among the legions of the lost. They are not crushed by the weight of centuries. Most heartening, among the young, the spirit of challenge and determination for change is becoming an unquenchable force. But the scope of struggle is still too narrow and too restricted. We must turn more of our energies and focus our creativity on the useful things that translate into power. This is not a program for the distant tomorrow when the children and somehow have acquired enough education to do it for themselves. We in this generation must do the work, and in doing it, stimulate our children to learn and acquire higher levels of skill and technique. We must become a crusade to so vital that civil rights organizers do not repeatedly have to make personal calls to summon support. They must be a climate of social pressure in the Negro community that scorns the Negro who will not pick up his citizenship rights and add his strength enthusiastically and voluntarily to the accumulation of power for himself and his people. The past years have blown fresh winds through ghetto stagnation, but we are on the threshold of a significant change that demands a hundredfold acceleration. By 1970, 10 of our larger cities will have Negro majorities if present trends continue. We can shrug off this opportunity or use it for a new vitality to deepen and enrich our family and community life. How shall we turn the ghettos into a vast school? How shall we make every street corner a forum, not a lounging place for a for a trivial gossip and petty gambling, where life is wasted and human experience withers to trivial sensations. How shall we make every houseworker and every laborer a demonstrator, a voter, a canvasser, and a student? The dignity their jobs may deny them is waiting for them in the political and social action. We must utilize the community action groups and training centers now proliferating in some of slum areas to create not merely an electorate, but a conscious, alert, and informed people who know their direction and whose collective wisdom and vitality commands respect. The slave heritage can also be cast into the dim past by our consciousness of our strengths and resolute determination to use them in our duty, in our daily experiences. Power is not the white man's birthright. It will not be legislated for us and delivered in neat government packages. It is a social force any group can utilize by accumulating its elements in a planned, deliberate campaign to organize it under its own control. So, yeah, Dr. King talking about the use of education and social togetherness as a political force and the need to get political for the African American community. But I will go ahead and end this episode here. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tries to tell you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next episode. Until then, later.